very soft, rhythmic, and soothing. There is a particular cruelty in being made helpless in your own sanctuary. The dining room of my Georgetown brownstone had witnessed 50 years of life, joyful Thanksgivings, quiet anniversaries, the gentle clatter of family. Tonight, it witnessed a different kind of ritual, a slow, public dismantling. I am Dr. Susan Miller. For 35 years, I was a neurosurgeon. My hands guided instruments through the most delicate landscapes of the human brain. Now, my right hand, or rather the crude plaster cast that encased it, lay heavy and useless on the damask tablecloth. The radius bone was fractured with displacement. I'd heard the sickening snap myself. The air was thick with the smell of my own recipe, rosemary and garlic-crusted roast lamb, haricot verts with almonds, scalloped potatoes that had taken me all afternoon to prepare yesterday before the world changed. The table gleamed under the chandelier, my grandmother's silver, my wedding china, and at the head of the table, in the high-backed chair that had been my husband Robert's, sat my son-in-law, Kevin Johnson. To health, Kevin boomed, raising a glass of my 2010 Bordeaux. His face was already ruddy. Around him sat 3 of his subordinates from the Department of Public Works, eating with the tense politeness of hostages. To clarity. Sometimes clarity requires firmness. His eyes slid to me, then to my empty plate. A smirk played on his lips. My daughter, Jessica, sat to his left. She wouldn't meet my gaze. She focused on cutting her food into impossibly small pieces, as if by concentrating hard enough she could disappear. "It's for her own good, really," Kevin continued, addressing the table as if giving a briefing. "At her age, appetite dims, digestion slows. A little fasting can reset the system, prevent accidents." He stressed the last word. An accident, that was their story. The story they'd settled on after Kevin, in a frenzy of rage the night before, had demanded I sign the deed to the brownstone. He had debts, bad ones. "Sign it over to Jessica. It's just a formality. You'll live here until the end." When I refused, he'd shoved me, not a stumble, but a hard, targeted thrust into the solid oak doorframe of my study. My arm went up to protect my face. The crack was audible. Jessica had been standing in the hallway, a silent statue. She saw it all. She said nothing as Kevin yanked the phone cord from the wall, took my cell, and locked me in the study. "Think about it," he'd hissed through the door. I did think. I thought through the pain, using the cold, clinical part of my mind that had navigated countless medical crises. Panic was a luxury that killed patients. I needed a plan. With my left hand, I'd retrieved an old emergency kit from my wardrobe, a relic from my practicing days. Inside, next to vials of saline, was a prepaid phone, the kind you buy with cash. I charged it once a month out of an old habit of preparedness, a habit my late husband, a former intelligence analyst, had instilled in me. The battery had 1 bar. It was enough. I dialed a number from memory, one I hadn't called in 25 years. It rang twice. "Speak." The voice was deeper, weathered with time and responsibility, but unmistakable. "Michael," I said, my voice tight with pain, "it's Susan Miller. I need an extraction and a scalpel." There was no hesitation, no questions about the past, just the sharp intake of breath of a soldier snapping to attention. Location, status. I gave him the address. Status, contained. 1 hostile, armed with greed and local authority. 1 compromised ally. I couldn't bring myself to label Jessica as hostile. Not yet. Patient has a defensive fracture of the right radius and is being starved of intel and sustenance. Understood. Stand by. ETA 24 hours. Can you hold? I've held steady through longer bremstem procedures. I've replied. Just bring the right tools. Copy that. And Susan, hang on. That was last night. Today, Kevin had magnanimously allowed me out of the study to enjoy the dinner party he'd decided to host, a show of normalcy, a demonstration of his control. I was the prop in his theater of power. "More wine, Brian?" Kevin asked one of the young men, who jumped at his name. "Don't be shy, it's paid for." The unspoken words hung in the air, with what will soon be my money. Jessica finally spoke, her voice a thin wire. "Mother, if you're not eating, perhaps you should rest. You look tired." It wasn't concern, it was a plea for me to vanish, to remove the uncomfortable evidence of their crime from the room. The grandfather clock in the corner chimed once, 7:45. My heartbeat, which had been a slow, pained throb, began to sync with its ticking. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Procedure time. Kevin was regaling the table with a story about a contract he'd steered to a friend's firm. The subordinates nodded, their laughter brittle. I cleared my throat. It was a dry, soft sound, but it cut through his bluster. "Kevin."
Very soft, rhythmic, and soothing. He turned, his eyes narrowing. "Yes, Susan. Need the water pitcher? Can you manage with your left hand, or shall I pour for you?" Condescension dripped from every word. I looked past him, to the clock. "You're sitting in my husband's chair." My voice was calm, diagnostic, and by my chronometer, your tenancy has 15 minutes remaining. I suggest you savor it. A stunned silence fell. Then Kevin threw his head back and laughed, a loud, performative sound. "You hear that? She's giving me an eviction notice from my own dinner table." He wagged a finger at me, grinning at his audience. "See? This is the stubbornness I deal with, the confusion. It's why we have to make decisions for her." The clock's pendulum swung. Tick-tock. At 7:58, the performance began to fray. Kevin's jokes grew sharper, his glances toward the foyer more frequent. He was waiting for his own guest, a notary public on his payroll, due at 8 to witness my voluntary signature on the deed, now that I was softened up by pain and humiliation. At 7:59, I straightened my spine as much as the pain allowed. I was no longer just a victim. I was the lead surgeon, and the operating theater was my home. The doorbell rang at precisely 8 o'clock. Not the gentle chime, but a long, insistent drone Kevin had installed, a sound he found authoritative. His face lit up with triumph. "Ah, our final guest. Business before pleasure, folks." He pushed back from the table, adjusting his suit jacket. "This will just take a moment. Jessica, sweetheart, why don't you help your mother find a pen?" He strode to the foyer, all puffed up certainty. We heard the door open. "Right on time. Come in. Come." His voice vanished. It didn't trail off. It was amputated. The sound that replaced it was the sound of order. Not the shuffle of soft-soled shoes, but the firm, synchronized tread of leather boots on hardwood. A rhythm that spoke of discipline and purpose. 2 men entered the dining room first. They were not city notaries. They wore dark, impeccably tailored suits, but their posture, their alert stillness, screamed Secret Service. They scanned the room in one swift, practiced motion, their eyes missing nothing: the lavish food, the terrified guests, my cast, my empty plate. An almost imperceptible tremor went through him, the kind of tremor that precedes an earthquake. He walked past Kevin as if he were a piece of furniture. He didn't acknowledge the sputtered, "Governor Thompson?" He came straight to me, and in a move that stole the breath from every person in the room, he went down on one knee beside my chair. He took my left hand gently in both of his. His hands were warm, steady. "Susan," he said, his voice a low, private rumble that nonetheless carried to every corner. "You told me you fell." His eyes, burning with a cold fire, moved from my cast to the empty plate. "You didn't tell me they were starving you."
The silence was so profound I could hear the condensation drip from the wine cooler in the corner. Governor Thompson stood. He turned to the table. With a single look, he commanded the space. He walked to the head of the table. Kevin, moving on pure animal instinct, scrambled out of the chair. The governor sat. He picked up a clean fork and knife. He didn't look at anyone as he carved a portion of lamb. He cut it, not into chunks, but into precise, delicate bites. Then he did something that transformed the entire humiliating scene. He fed me, not with pity, but with a solemn, respectful ceremony. Each bite was an act of restoration, of dignity being returned. The food tasted of more than sustenance. It tasted of justice. When the edge of my hunger was gone, I nodded to my handbag on the sideboard. Michael, the red envelope from the city archives.
Very soft, rhythmic, and soothing. Kevin found his voice, a wheezing, desperate thing. "Governor, sir, please, there's a misunderstanding. My mother-in-law, she's unwell. She gets confused, she falls. We've been so worried." "There are no stairs in this brownstone, Kevin," I said, my voice clear. "Not a single step. It was renovated for wheelchair access when Robert's arthritis grew severe. You've lived here for 5 years. You should know that." Governor Thompson pulled the document from my bag. He didn't read it to himself. He read it aloud, his voice a judge's pronouncement. "Deed of gift from Dr. Susan L. Miller to the Georgetown University Hospital Neurotrauma Foundation in perpetuity, with a single reserved right, the lifetime tenancy of the donor, Dr. Susan L. Miller, dated 10 years, 2 months, and 17 days ago." He looked up at Kevin, whose jaw was slack. "You broke a woman's arm," the governor said, each word dropping like a stone, "to try and steal a property she gave away a decade ago. You were fighting for a ghost." He gave a barely perceptible nod to one of the suits, who spoke softly into his cuff. "Sir, the AG's office and the FBI forensic accounting team are standing by. They've already initiated a deep dive audit into the Department of Public Works, focusing on all contracts approved or overseen by Deputy Commissioner Johnson for the last 6 fiscal years. Initial flags show irregularities in the tens of millions." Kevin made a sound like a tea kettle boiling dry. You can't. I have rights. This is my home." "It is a historical property owned by a medical foundation," Governor Thompson corrected, his voice colder than the ice in the wine bucket. "And you, Mr. Johnson, are a guest who has severely overstayed his welcome, and, it appears, a public servant who has severely breached the public trust." The rest was a swift, clinical excision. The agents moved in. Kevin was read his rights in my dining room, his protests dissolving into incoherent sputters. As he was led away, he looked back at Jessica, his eyes screaming for her to save him. Jessica simply stared, hollowed out. She was not arrested, but an agent informed her she would be taken to a hotel for questioning as a material witness. As she passed me, clutching a small bag, she finally met my eyes. I saw no love, no remorse, only a stunned, childish betrayal that her life was ruined. And then they were gone. The guests had fled minutes before. The governor's aides quietly cleared the table, leaving only a pot of tea and 2 cups. Michael Thompson sat with me in the quiet. "Susan," he said, pouring the tea, "a full-time nurse, a security detail, a move to the governor's residence if you wish, anything, name it." I looked past him, to the sideboard.
On it sat a single, perfect slice of chocolate torte I had made yesterday. Beside it, a silver dessert fork. "Just that fork, Michael," I said softly. He understood. He brought it to me. With my left hand, my non-dominant hand, I took it. My fingers, which had steadied themselves for a lifetime to perform microscopic surgery, now trembled slightly around a simple utensil. I ignored the tremor. I focused. I cut a bite of the torte, lifted it, and tasted it. The chocolate was rich, complex, sweet, a flavor of my own making, consumed by my own will. He said I was helpless, I told the governor, who watched with a small, proud smile. He said I couldn't even feed myself. I just needed the right conditions to prove him wrong. Governor Thompson raised his teacup in a silent toast to resilience, to quiet strength, to the formidable power of a woman who knows exactly when to call for the right kind of backup and exactly how to wield her own scalpel, even when it's just a fork. And so the house grew still, not with the silence of defeat, but with the profound quiet of a battle ended, a fever broken. The oppressive air cleared, replaced by the gentle night breeze from an open window. Let the steady, unchanging tick-tock of the grandfather clock lull you now, a sound that outlasts tantrums, outlasts greed, a sound that simply marks the peaceful passage of time. Feel the weight of that cast, not as a prison, but as a temporary shell, protecting the mending bone beneath. The pain is a distant echo, fading with every beat of your calm, steady heart. Breathe in the scent of tea, of clean air. The cloying smells of fear and arrogance are gone, washed away. There is only space now, space to heal, space to breathe, space to be still. You are safe in this quiet aftermath. The turmoil has passed. The instruments of justice have done their work. Now it is time for rest, for the deep, restorative sleep that comes after a long and wearying fight. Let your muscles unclench, your thoughts slow, guided into gentle darkness by the simple, satisfying click of a fork placed neatly on an empty plate, a meal finished, a victory, however quiet, fully won. Good night.